The man who couldn't be found, and the little girl who found him under the twinkling Christmas lights. A little girl whispered to Santa, "I miss her so much. It's not Mommy's last Christmas." She didn't know that a lonely man standing just behind her had heard every word, and what he did next would change both their lives forever. Snow drifted through the December air of Chicago's Millennium Park like tiny fragments of glass, catching the golden glow of the holiday lights. Families huddled together. Children shrieked as they pointed toward the enormous tree, and the rich smell of roasted chestnuts mingled with the biting winter wind. But for Ethan Vance, none of it meant anything. The world could have been covered in a sheet of ice, and he wouldn't have noticed. He walked through the crowd in his fitted, expensive charcoal wool coat, utterly useless against the cold that started inside him. Every laugh, every carol, even the bells rung by the Salvation Army volunteers, blurred into a hollow murmur. His heart hadn't felt warmth in 3 years, not since the night he lost the only person who had ever made Christmas feel real. He remembered holding his wife's hand in the hospital, feeling it slacken, and the world falling silent even before the doctors spoke. Tonight, the memory clung to him like frost, tightening around his chest as it did every December. He would have walked right past the little Santa stage if it hadn't been for the voice. Small, fragile, trembling like a dying flame. "It's Mommy's last Christmas. Please, Santa, before she doesn't wake up." The words cut through the muffled stillness like a serrated blade. Ethan stopped so abruptly that a couple behind him mumbled in annoyance as they sidestepped him. He barely noticed. The air caught in his throat. A whiplash of pain shot through his ribs as if someone had reached inside and squeezed. A cloud of white vapor escaped his lips as he exhaled shakily, forcing himself to remain steady against a surge of emotion he hadn't felt in years. He spun around and saw her, a girl no older than 7, standing before Santa in a faded pink coat with frayed cuffs. The zipper was broken halfway, leaving her thin sweater exposed to the biting wind swirling around her. Other children were tugging their parents toward toy stores, bundled in puffer coats and wool pom-pom hats. She looked like she was from another world entirely. Her honey-brown hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her cheeks flushed, not from excitement, but from the cold. Her eyes glistened with tears she fought to hold back. She thanked Santa in a tiny voice and stepped down from the stage, swaying as if her legs were too tired to hold her. Ethan watched as her knees buckled before her body collapsed completely. Instinct took over. His feet moved faster than his mind, pushing through the crowd until he knelt beside her on the icy pavement. Hey, little one, take it easy." His voice came out rough, rusted from disuse. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, but holding that strange mix of fear and determination. She tried to get up but fell again. Ethan gently gripped her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She blinked slowly and whispered, in a voice that was little more than a breath, "Please don't take me away. I have to get back to Mommy." The words hit him harder than any winter wind. A little girl, freezing, passing out on a Christmas night, and her only fear was being taken away from her sick mother. Something broke inside Ethan, something he thought had been dead for years. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment when his entire life shifted. This was the moment Christmas found him again. Ethan didn't remember standing up. One moment he was kneeling on the cold ground beside the girl, and the next, he was gently lifting her into his arms. She weighed next to nothing. Her coat was thin, stiff with dry snow, and when her cheek brushed Ethan's neck, he felt how cold her skin was. Too cold for a child out alone at night. "We're going to warm you up," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she heard him. She was barely trembling, her breaths short and ragged. Ethan tightened his grip and scanned for the nearest stand. A small hot chocolate stall glowed under a yellow lamp a few feet away. He walked quickly, dodging shoppers and tourists who barely glanced their way. Inside, something unsettling pulled at him, a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. At the stand, he bought the largest cup of hot chocolate they had. The vendor raised an eyebrow at the girl in Ethan's arms. He didn't bother to explain. He just asked for extra whipped cream. He set the girl down gently on a nearby bench before handing her the cup. She took it with trembling fingers, the heat barely registering as her hands shook violently. Her lips were tinged blue. Her voice was raspy and small. "Thank you." The way she said it, soft, polite, as if she didn't expect kindness, hit him in a place he had walled off long ago. "Drink it slow," he said. She nodded, though she could barely hold the cup steady. He leaned closer, holding her hands with his own. For a moment, she looked up at him. Her eyes were the color of winter branches, brown with flecks of desperation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Davis." Before she could say more, his cell phone began to vibrate in his pocket. Sharp, insistent, endless. He ignored it at first, but the buzzing continued. Board meeting messages, investor alerts, the meeting he was already late for. He pulled out the phone and looked at the screen. 10 notifications, 6 missed calls, the name of a major investor blinking at the top. He stared at it, gripping the phone. Then he looked at Lily. He really looked. Her skinny wrists, her trembling lips, her small body curled up against the cold and hunger. When she tried to take another sip of the cocoa, her hand shook so hard that a drop spilled onto her sleeve and nearly froze instantly. Her fingers clung to the cardboard cup as if it were the only warmth she had left in the world. And in that moment, something in him shifted. He pressed the power-off button until the screen went black. The ensuing silence felt like taking a breath for the first time. Lily didn't seem to notice his internal battle. She stared at the swirl of melting cream in the cocoa, her eyes clouded with exhaustion. "When did you last eat?" Ethan asked. She shrugged without looking up. "Yesterday, I think. Sometimes I skip dinner so Mommy can have more." Her words were delivered with simplicity, without complaint, as if this were normal. A sharp sting went through Ethan. "Do you have heat at home?" She shook her head. "The heater broke. We wear socks on our hands." Her breath fogged the air in front of her. "Mommy is very sick. She sleeps a lot. I walk all the way here so she can rest." She tried to stand. Her legs gave way under her weight. Instinctively, she reached out, not toward his hand, but toward the hem of his long coat. A gentle, tiny tug, as if she didn't want to presume she was allowed to hold on to him. Ethan slowed his pace, letting her stabilize, adjusting his rhythm to her careful, small steps. The gesture was so small, so unconscious, that it broke him more than any confession she had made. As they walked north, the city changed street by street, the festive lights thinning, the crowds vanishing, the holiday spirit dissipating into darkened storefronts and forgotten corners. Lily walked in silence, clinging to his coat the entire time. Once, when a strong gust of wind swept down the side street, she leaned closer to him, not quite touching, but leaning into his shadow as if he offered protection. "Is it far?" he asked softly. "Just a little further," she said. "Mommy can't climb stairs anymore, so I go everywhere for both of us." His throat constricted. She led him past a dimly lit liquor store, a closed-up laundromat, and finally, to a narrow brick building with a rusty fire escape. The entry light flickered weakly over the door. As they approached, a tall, thin, sneering man stepped out, arms crossed over a dirty parka. His eyes slid over Lily with a cold amusement that instantly made Ethan tense. "Well, look who decided to come back," the man sneered. Lily froze behind Ethan, gripping his coat with both hands now. Victor, she whispered, barely a sound. So this was him, the man she feared. Victor grinned smugly at Ethan, sizing him up. Nice coat. You her new charity case or something? Ethan stepped forward on instinct, shielding Lily. I'm just walking her home. How sweet. Victor snorted. Tell your mother the rent is past due. If I don't see the money by Friday, both of you are out on the street, and no crying about heaters or anything. Lily shivered. Victor noticed and smiled. Ethan felt something hot rise inside him. Rage. The clean, sharp kind he hadn't felt since the night a doctor told him his wife wasn't coming home. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He just said, very quietly, "Get out of the way." Victor's smirk faltered. "Suit yourself," he muttered, moving aside. "It ain't my problem." He disappeared down the alley. Ethan exhaled slowly and turned to Lily. "Let's go in." She nodded, leading him up the creaking stairs to a door with chipped paint. She fumbled with the lock. Ethan took a slow breath, bracing himself. He didn't know what he expected. He only knew that whatever waited behind that door was going to change everything. The door opened with a weary groan, as if even the hinges were exhausted from enduring too many winters. As soon as Ethan crossed the threshold, the cold hit him first. Sharp, stagnant, the kind that gets into your bones and stays. Then came the smell, a damp mixture of mold and old carpet, covered slightly by the bitter odor of disinfectant, the kind hospitals use when they've given up on anything smelling truly clean. It was the scent of survival, not comfort. The air felt thick, motionless, as if hope had been sealed inside this apartment, along with everything else. A faint, irregular humming vibrated in the space. When Ethan turned his head, he saw it. The oxygen machine in the corner, rattling with a sickly rhythm that sounded like it could fail at any moment. Its thin tube stretched across the floor into a small bedroom. Every few seconds, the machine sputtered, stopped, and then resumed its desperate effort. Lily took off her shoes with a practiced precision and lined them up by the door. The soles were almost completely worn through. She gestured for Ethan to follow, her small shoulders hunched protectively, as if preparing him to judge the place she called home. He took another step, and the soft crunch under his shoe made him stop short. The linoleum beneath his feet was cracked, curling at the edges like burnt paper. He looked at his polished leather Italian shoes, sleek, immaculate, and the contrast struck him like a slap. They looked monstrous on that fragile floor, out of place, almost shameful. He swallowed, forcing himself past the guilt scratching at his chest. "Lily, is that you?" A faint voice whispered from the bedroom. It was thin, brittle, as if made of threads about to snap. Lily rushed in. "Mommy, I'm here. I brought someone good." Ethan followed her into the small room, and the scene hit him harder than the cold. Ilara Davis lay on a narrow mattress, if it could be called a mattress, propped up with two mismatched pillows. Her face was ghost pale, her cheeks sunken, her lips dry and cracked. Her hair clung to her forehead in wilted strands. Every inhalation seemed like a battle she fought alone. The blanket covering her was thin and patched, barely warming her fragile body. When she saw Ethan, her eyes opened a bit wider, though exhaustion soon forced them to narrow again. "Hello," she whispered, her voice rough and dry. She tried to push herself up on trembling elbows. Lily rushed to steady her. "Mommy, no, it's okay. He came to help." But Ilara shook her head weakly, determined to show some strength in front of a stranger. Her arms gave out almost immediately, and she started to slump. Ethan lunged forward, catching her just before she fell back onto the bed. She weighed less than he imagined, a lightness that startled him. "Easy," he said quietly. "Don't strain yourself." Ilara blinked slowly, her breathing shallow, her body shaking as she tried to regain her senses. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Everything is a little blurry." Lily sat beside her, stroking her mother's forehead with a tenderness that broke his soul. "Mommy, rest, please." Ilara gave her daughter a weak smile, then shifted her gaze back to Ethan, studying him despite her fading strength. The gratitude in her eyes was unmistakable, and so was the shame. She looked at the cracked ceiling as if apologizing for the place she had been forced to raise her daughter. Ethan took a moment to observe everything around him. A single lamp flickered weakly, barely illuminating the room. Piles of medical bills were stacked on an overturned laundry basket. An electric radiator in the corner was unplugged, likely broken, its cord frayed near the base. The window pane rattled with every gust of wind, letting in slivers of icy air. A small drawing taped to the wall caught his attention. A simple sketch showed Lily holding a Christmas star, with her mother smiling beside her. The paper edges were stained, but the hope in the drawing was unmistakable. Lily gently tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can you help her?" she asked, her voice tiny, fragile. Her eyes, those deep winter brown eyes, held a mix of desperation and trust. A trust he hadn't yet earned, but which she offered him anyway. Ethan nodded, clearing his throat. "I will do everything I can." Ilara's eyes opened again, struggling to focus. Her hand lifted weakly, trembling, uncertain, reaching out. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely more than air. "Don't let them take Lily." Ethan frowned slightly. "Who is trying to take her?" Ilara hesitated, her gaze sliding toward the cracked ceiling, as if weighing whether to speak. "Her father, Troy Calhoun. He left years ago, but lately I think he knows I'm dying." Her voice trembled, almost inaudible. "He doesn't want Lily. He just wants control." The room fell silent. Lily remained motionless, her small hand clutching her mother's fingers tightly. Ethan stared at Ilara, his heart pounding hard. He didn't know the details yet, not about social services, not about the landlord, nor the threats he would soon face. But there was something in that plea, something raw and terrified, that sank deep inside him. Protect her. The words resonated in his mind like a vow he didn't fully understand, but to which he already felt bound, as Ilara's hand fell weakly onto the blanket. Lily carefully took it and drew it into her lap, holding it tenderly. Ethan stayed there, absorbing the weight of the moment, feeling the heat of desperation in that room settle onto his shoulders. He understood that walking into this apartment wasn't just walking into their world. It was taking on a responsibility he had never imagined, one he didn't know if he was ready for. But looking at Lily, clinging to her mother's hand like a lifeline, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't leave. For a long moment, the room seemed frozen. Nothing could be heard but the irregular hiss of the failing oxygen machine and the faint murmur of the city creeping in through the cracked window. Ethan felt a weight settle on his chest, a weight he hadn't felt since those days pushing his wife's wheelchair through the hospital corridors. Then something clicked inside him. An instinct, a decision, a promise unsaid but felt in his bones. He took off his coat, laid it at the foot of Ilara's bed, and moved with a calm determination that surprised even himself. In the apartment's dim light, he pulled out his phone and dialed his private physician. "Dr. Julian Cole, it's Ethan Vance. I need a house call immediately. Yes, tonight. Bring all the equipment you can. She is in critical condition." His tone brooked no argument. He hung up and went to the cold, dark kitchen. The refrigerator door creaked open. Inside, there were only two things: half a bottle of expired juice and a bruised apple that spread like ink on its skin. Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose, a dull anger simmering beneath the surface. Not at Ilara or Lily, but at a world that allowed something like this to happen. He found a small saucepan, rinsed it in the sink, and filled it with water. The faucet spat before dropping an uneven stream of water. The apartment seemed to be holding on by a miracle. He heated the water as much as the old stove allowed, poured it into a chipped mug, and carried it to the bedroom. "We're going to try to get you to drink something," he said quietly. Alara moved faintly, her eyelids trembling as he gently propped her up, supporting her shoulders with one arm. Her skin was cold, too cold, as if she had been floating between two worlds. "Slowly," he murmured. She tried. Her lips trembled as they touched the warm water, and she managed a small sip. It was barely anything, but it was something. Lily watched in silence from the foot of the bed, her hands clenched into fists inside her sleeves. When Ethan set the mug aside, he took off his cashmere scarf and carefully wrapped it around her small neck. "It's warm," Lily said softly, brushing her cheek against it, as if she couldn't help it. "It's yours now," he replied. Her eyes widened with a mix of surprise and gratitude that tightened his chest. He turned toward the window, where the icy wind seeped through the cracks. With a roll of duct tape he found under the sink and a piece of cardboard from a cereal box. He taped up the draft. It wasn't perfect, but the room became noticeably warmer. The apartment door buzzed once and Lily jumped, fear flashing in her eyes. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "Easy, no one is coming in." That small gesture seemed to undo something inside her. She took a step closer, leaning into him just a little. Before he could say anything else, his phone rang. He pulled it out and saw his assistant's name. "Sarah?" he answered. "Ethan, where in the hell are you?" Sarah's voice sounded frantic. "The board is in chaos. Stock dropped 6 points in 2 hours. Morrison flew in for the meeting and you haven't shown up. They're asking if you plan to resign." "I'm busy," he interrupted. "Busy? Ethan, this could cost you everything." He looked at Alara's fragile body, Lily's terrified eyes, the broken heater, and with a calm he didn't know he possessed, he said, "Then it will cost me everything. I'm where I need to be." He hung up. He didn't explain. He didn't justify. For the first time in years, he simply chose what mattered. It wasn't long before Dr. Julian Cole arrived with his black medical bag, his breath steaming in the stairwell. He examined Alara, adjusted the oxygen flow, started an IV, and made notes with a furrowed brow that told Ethan everything he needed to know. Alara was running out of time after the doctor left, promising to return in the morning with medication. Ethan picked up fallen pills on the floor, organized the cluttered nightstand, and helped Lily fold the scattered blankets. She moved like a child twice her age, careful, quiet, accustomed to pain. When she found a broken ornament under the bed, a small ceramic angel, she handed it to Ethan. "It was Mommy's favorite. I tried to fix the wing, but the glue wouldn't hold." He crouched beside her, examining the tiny figure. "We'll fix it together," he said, and Lily swallowed, pressing her lips together to hide how much that meant to her. The night didn't end as either of them expected. Just after the doctor left, Alara's breathing became thin and erratic. Every inhalation seemed to drag, as if the air had become too heavy for her lungs. Ethan tried to stabilize her, but within minutes her skin was cold and her pulse fluttered like a signal dying out. He didn't hesitate. He called 911, his voice low but steady, and the paramedics arrived in a whirlwind of red lights that filled the narrow building hallway. Lily clung to his coat the entire way, her small sobs shaking against him as the ambulance sped through the city. At the hospital, they stayed until Alara was stable, if that word could even apply. Machines did most of the work, hissing and clicking beside her bed while nurses moved silently through the room. Lily never let go of Ethan's hand, her eyes wide and dry, too tired even to cry. It wasn't long before visiting hours ended, and a nurse gently suggested Lily needed rest. Ethan looked at the sterile waiting room, The hard plastic chairs, the buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant. And he knew it was no place for a child to fall asleep. Without a word, he picked Lily up. "Come on," he whispered. "You're coming with me tonight." Later, in his corporate office, he took Lily with him. Not for convenience, but because the idea of leaving her alone in that freezing apartment made his stomach turn. The building lobby glowed with an enormous Christmas tree, gold ribbons, and warm lights. Lily looked at it with the silent awe of a child who learned too early not to ask for what she couldn't have. He took her up to his private office, with its minimalist glass walls overlooking Chicago from above. For the first time, the space felt too large, too empty. Lily sat at his glass desk, her legs dangling from the chair, drawing with the colored pencils he kept in a drawer from an old corporate family day. Ethan half-heartedly reviewed a contract, glancing over at her every few seconds. At one point, her hand slowed. Her eyelids drooped, her head tilted to the side. And before he could move, she rested gently against his arm. She had fallen asleep, soft, small, utterly trusting. Something inside Ethan thawed. He didn't move. Not even when his arm started to go numb. Not even when she nestled closer, resting her cheek against him. He remained perfectly still, watching the faint rise and fall of her breath, feeling the faint warmth of her presence seep into the cold parts of himself he thought would never unfreeze. He looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully against him, wrapped in his scarf, safe for the first time in who knows how long. And in that silent, dimly lit office, suspended above the city, he made a silent vow. He would not let anyone take her away. The days that followed passed with a strange, quiet rhythm. Nothing like Ethan's old life, yet somehow firmer than anything he had known in years. Every morning, instead of walking into a boardroom, he found himself crossing the hospital lobby with a bag of hot sandwiches or small cartons of chocolate milk, because Lily liked to drink it slowly, saving the last sip like a little prize. The nurses began greeting them by name. "Good morning, Lily. Good morning, Mr. Vance." He corrected them, told them to call him Ethan, but the title stuck. Lily walked beside him every day, her small hand curled around two of his fingers, always leaving a space, never fully gripping unless she was scared. And every time she squeezed his hand, every time her small palm pressed against his, something inside him softened a little more. Ilara's room had become an anchor for both of them, even as she drifted in and out of consciousness. She tried to smile every time Lily rushed to her side. Some afternoons, when Ilara was awake enough, Lily would sit on the edge of the bed and read her small fragments from picture books, her voice trembling but determined. On quieter nights, Ethan simply sat by Ilara while Lily slept in the recliner chair. Just the three of them, in a space that felt fragile, suspended between hope and reality. He stayed even when no one spoke, even when the silence was heavy, because for the first time since he lost his wife, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt necessary. At home, his penthouse began to lose its cold, museum-like perfection. It started with a Lily's candy wrapper, bright red, sugary, left on his marble countertop after she slipped a sweet into his pocket at the hospital. Then came a small, lopsided paper snowflake she had made during art therapy hour. She had proudly taped it to his immaculate glass wall with a piece of medical tape. He didn't remove it. The next day, she left her scarf on the sofa. The day after that, one of her mismatched mittens appeared on the floor next to the leather armchair. Before long, his flawless home was peppered with small traces of her. A pink glove here, a tiny drawing there. And every time he saw one, something warm, sparked in his chest. Faint but constant, like an ember that refused to be extinguished. For the first time in years, Ethan slept through the night. It happened unexpectedly. He had come home exhausted, the weight of Lily still on his shoulder from where she had fallen asleep in the car. When he closed his eyes, he expected the usual restless tossing, the dark memories, the phantom ache of loss. But instead, he sank into deep, uninterrupted sleep. No nightmares, no sudden awakenings. The next morning, when he looked in the bathroom mirror, he noticed something strange. The crease between his eyebrows, the one that had taken root since his wife's death, was softer, less pronounced. He stared at his reflection for a long moment before shaking his head in disbelief. "What are you doing to me, little one?" he muttered, though he already knew the answer. Later that week, when Ethan walked into the hospital room, he found Alara propped up with extra pillows, a faint sheen on her face. Her hands moved slowly, clumsily, but with intention. She was knitting, or trying to. A small, bumpy scarf rested on her lap, riddled with uneven stitches and holes where the yarn had slipped. But she kept working with a determination that was almost painful to watch. Lily looked up proudly. "She's been doing it all morning," she whispered. "She wanted to surprise you." Ethan approached the bed softly. Alara stopped, took a breath, and then lifted the scarf with trembling hands. "It's not very good," she gasped, with a crooked but warm smile. "But I wanted you to have something made with my hands, not just my gratitude." Ethan swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in his eyes. "It's perfect," he said, and he meant it. Lily nestled onto the bed beside her mother, resting her head carefully on her shoulder. "Mommy says you brought the warmth back to my life," she said quietly. "But I think you brought it back to yours too." Ethan didn't dare answer, but the way his breath hitched gave him away. The days continued like this, small moments stitched together to form something larger. He learned to braid Lily's hair, though the first attempts were disastrous. She would laugh, insisting it looked like a twisted pretzel, and he would try again until it was somewhat presentable. She scribbled on sticky notes and left them on his laptop. Simple drawings of trees, snowmen, or him holding a star. When she found a tie she liked in his closet, a dark green one, she decided it made him look less sad. He wore it the next day. One afternoon, as the hospital sky turned amber, Alara fell asleep with her head turned toward the window. Lily was curled up in the recliner, wrapped in Ethan's scarf. The monitors beeped softly, the steady pulse of the machines filling the room with a fragile peace. It was then that the calm shattered. A warning alarm sounded. A single beep, then another. Sharper. More urgent. The heart monitor line trembled with erratic spikes. Ethan's blood ran cold. He moved forward, his hand suspended in the air, his eyes locked on the screen's rising chaos. Nurses rushed in immediately, checking Alara's vitals, adjusting wires, murmuring among themselves with grim faces. Lily woke up sharply, standing instantly, her breath caught in her throat. "Mommy!" Her voice trembled. Ethan put a firm hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, little one. They're helping her." But his voice was strained, betraying a fear he couldn't hide. Lily's fingers hooked onto his coat, clenching tight. This time, not just the hem, but her whole hand, gripping with all her might. As the nurses worked, Ilara's body trembled, her breaths shallow, growing weaker. Lily pressed against Ethan, shaking, tears welling up, but refusing to fall. Ethan wrapped his arm around the girl, pulling her to his chest, giving her all the support possible. The machine emitted another beep, slow, steady, ominous. the calm before the storm had arrived. The hallway lights outside Alara's room flickered dimly as the night grew deeper. But inside, everything felt too bright for what was happening. The machines beeped in irregular, hesitant rhythms. The nurses moved with trained urgency, and the cold smell of antiseptic filled the air as they adjusted tubes and checked screens. Lily clung to Ethan, her small hands clutching handfuls of his coat as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling. Her trembling traveled up Ethan's arm, settling painfully in his chest. He tried to reassure her with a deep breath, but even he couldn't take a full one. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her voice broken, looking at the rise and fall of Alara's frail chest. "Mommy, please wake up. Please." Her words dissolved into a choked sob. Ethan guided her toward the bed, kneeling beside her so they were both at the level of Alara's face. The fluorescent light bathed her pale skin, giving her an almost unreal stillness. Her breaths were faint and irregular, like paper crumbling with each inhalation. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't trust his voice. He just wrapped his arm around Lily, holding her tight as the monitor gave another erratic peak. Then, against all hope, Alara moved. Barely. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling to open against exhaustion and pain. Lily gasped. "Mommy," she whispered again, her whole small body leaning forward, as if love alone could wake her. Alara's eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, then slowly searching across the room until they found Lily, and then Ethan. Something softened in her gaze, something that looked like relief mixed with farewell. Her lips parted, and a long sigh escaped. "You," she whispered, her voice thin as air. "You stayed." Ethan swallowed, nodding, though the gesture felt almost unreal. "Always," he replied, his voice rougher than he expected. Alara blinked, as if those words meant more to her than he imagined. With an effort that seemed to pain her, she raised her hand slightly, trembling, unsure, reaching out. Ethan didn't understand at first, until Lily stepped forward and took her mother's hand, gently guiding it to his. Alara laced her fingers around both of theirs. Her voice trembled. "My last Christmas gift is knowing she won't be alone." Lily broke, not into loud sobs, but into small, silent gasps, as if her body were folding in on itself. She shook violently, tears spilling uncontrollably as she pressed her forehead against her mother's hand. "Mommy, don't go," she whispered. "Please don't go." Ethan pulled her closer, wrapping both arms around her, anchoring her small body against his chest, as if he could protect her from the inevitable. He felt the girl's tremors filter into him. He felt her breath catch over and over. He felt the sting in his own eyes, which he could no longer hold back. Alara's breathing slowed, faint, fading, fighting against the inevitable. The room fell into a quiet so deep it seemed the outside world had vanished. Even the nurses stepped back, sensing the gravity of the moment. Lily lifted her head enough to see her mother's face. "Mommy," she whispered, "I love you." Alara's eyes shone with the last thread of strength she had left. "I love you too, my child," she whispered. Then her gaze slid one last time toward Ethan, soft, grateful, trusting. "Take care of each other." Her chest rose once, fell, and did not rise again. The monitor emitted a long, sustained tone. Lily's body collapsed. She didn't scream. She didn't cry loudly. She just trembled. Small, uncontrollable tremors that went through her like shock waves. Ethan held her close, holding her tight, whispering, "I've got you. I've got you." Over and over, because it was the only thing he could think to say. He held her until her shaking subsided enough for her to breathe, though her breaths were short and broken. Then the air changed. A slow, mocking clap echoed from the doorway. Ethan's head shot up, his blood ice cold. A man was leaning against the frame, tall, smug, wearing a cheap leather jacket, and the same kind of unpleasant arrogance Ethan had seen in men who never earned anything. His eyes were sharp, evaluating, and filled with something cruel. Lily instantly tensed, her fingers digging painfully into Ethan's sleeve. "No!" she sobbed. "No, no, no!" The man smirked. "Well, well, isn't this touching?" Ethan reacted instinctively, placing Lily behind him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and cold. The man tilted his head. "The name's Troy Calhoun." His smile widened, revealing a malicious line. "Lily's father." A small, broken whimper escaped Lily. Ethan straightened, protective posture, his eyes narrowing with a controlled fury he hadn't felt in years. Troy lifted his chin, unfazed. "I heard her mother finally kicked the bucket, so it's time for me to claim what's mine." He gave Lily a look that made Ethan's stomach twist. "Daddy's here," he said with a twisted smile. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. This man, this stranger, this predator disguised as a father. No, not again. Never again. Troy stepped forward, still smiling. "Get her things ready. I'm taking her tonight." Ethan stepped forward too, placing himself completely between Troy and Lily, his voice made of steel. "You're not taking her anywhere." Troy's eyes narrowed, the smile vanishing. "You think this is over?" "I know it is," Ethan replied. "Fine, we'll do it the legal way," Troy snapped. "You want to play the hero?" He pointed an accusatory finger at Lily. "Then I'll see you in court." He turned on his heel, his boots echoing down the hallway, leaving behind a silence charged with unresolved threats. Lily clung to Ethan's coat, her eyes wide with fear. "He can't. He's not going to take me, is he?" Ethan knelt beside her, his voice low and firm. "Not while I'm breathing." And Ethan knew this was the moment everything could either fall apart or truly begin. A week had passed since Alara's funeral. The days had blurred, each one filled with silent grief and a delicate hope. But today was different. This was the day Ethan would have to fight not only with love, but with the law. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood, and even older worries, papers stacked for decades, the ghosts of past arguments clinging to the corners, and the weight of decisions that had changed countless lives. Ethan sat in the front row. Lily was glued to his side, her small hand clutching his tightly. She held her drawing notebook against her chest like armor. She hadn't spoken much since Alara's death. Her eyes were swollen, her breathing soft and uneven, as if every inhalation struggled against the fear of what might happen. The room was small, almost intimate, with only a few rows of benches and a judge who seemed to carry the sorrow of hundreds of families. Judge Evelyn Hayes, with her silver hair pulled back into a low bun and the lines around her eyes revealing both weariness and compassion. A woman capable of reading the truth behind every trembling word. On the other side, Troy Calhoun lounged in his chair, his legs stretched out with too much confidence, an arrogant smirk sculpted onto his face. His cheap leather jacket creaked every time he moved. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed man with slicked back hair and a tie that shone too brightly under the room's lights, shuffled papers as if the noise made them more legitimate. Troy kept darting glances toward Lily, looks of predatory ownership that made Ethan's jaw tighten. Lily pressed a little closer to him each time. The judge began. "We are here to determine the temporary guardianship of the minor, Lily Davis." Her gaze swept the room. "Mr. Calhoun, can your counsel begin?" Troy's lawyer launched into a show of false paternal concern. Weak? Manufactured? Hollow? Words like biology, legitimate custody, Re-establishing bonds flowed from his mouth with rehearsed ease. Troy nodded solemnly at the right moments, feigning distress like a coat he could put on and take off. But the cracks were visible. Smirks when he thought no one was looking, eyes that darted toward the clock. Bored. When they finished, the judge turned her attention to Ethan's lawyer, Elena Ruiz, a woman with the firmness of someone who had dismantled men like Troy countless times. Elena stood up, calm and precise. She didn't rely on dramatics. She relied on the truth. She presented documented evidence of Troy's abandonment, police records of domestic violence, witness statements, years of unpaid child support, multiple changes of address without notice. She also read the report from Alara's palliative care nurse, detailing Troy's total absence in Lily's life. Then she presented the evidence of Ethan's involvement, his financial support, his constant presence at the hospital, his care for both Alara and Lily over the last few weeks. The room grew quieter with every sentence, the weight of reality suffocating the flimsy narrative Troy was trying to construct. But the moment that changed everything came when Elena said, "Your Honor, with your permission, Lily would like to present something." The judge softened her expression. "Lily, dear, would you like to come up?" Lily looked first at Ethan, her eyes wide, silently pleading for strength. He gently squeezed her hand. "I'm here," he whispered. She nodded, slowly stood, and walked toward the bench with her notebook clutched to her chest. When she reached the judge's desk, she opened the notebook to a page. A drawing. A Christmas tree. Her mother drawn as a little angel at the top, watching her from above. Lily stood beneath the tree, and next to her, holding her hand, was Ethan. The caption read, in careful letters, "The family mommy wished for." The judge stared at it for a long time, her expression changing, softening, cracking just enough to let something profoundly human show beneath the professional mask. "Lily," she said gently, "who drew this?" "I did," the girl whispered. It's what Mommy wanted. She said he stayed." She pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. "He never left us, not even when it was scary." And then, because the truth always finds a way out when the door is opened, she added, her voice breaking, "I don't want to go with the man who never came. I want to go with the man who did come." The room went still. Ethan felt the air constrict in his throat. Troy's lawyer stood to object, but the judge raised her hand, silencing him. She turned to Ethan. "Mr. Vance, do you wish to respond?" He stood up slowly, every eye in the room fixed on him. He walked to the front, stopping just behind Lily, his presence protective and unwavering. He knelt beside her, but spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice firm, but filled with emotion he didn't try to hide. "I am not here because of biology. I am here because I was present, because I held her when her mother died, because I promised Alara that I would not let anything happen to her daughter." He took a breath, looking at Troy with searing clarity. "This man abandoned Lily once. I would burn my entire fortune, every dollar, before I allow him to do it again." A murmur of surprise went through the room. Even the judge's eyes flickered. She exhaled, looked at Lily, then at Troy, and with a firm, deliberate voice that sounded like a verdict carved in justice, she said, "Temporary legal guardianship is granted to Mr. Ethan Vance, with a full adoption review scheduled after the new year." Troy leaped from his seat, his face red, shouting obscenities. A court officer quickly subdued him, but it no longer mattered. Lily ran to Ethan, burying her face in his chest as soft tears of relief finally spilled over. He held her tight, one hand on the back of her head, breathing in the fragile weight of the moment he had fought for. "You're safe," he whispered. "I've got you. I've got you." That afternoon, He carried her up to her new room in his home, a space painted a soft seafoam green, with framed drawings lined up on the walls as if they were museum pieces. A star-shaped nightlight glowed softly in the corner. "Is this mine?" Lily whispered, stroking the soft blanket on her bed. "All yours," Ethan said, kneeling beside her. She turned, took his tie with both hands, and straightened it with surprising concentration. "Ready?" she asked, repeating the words he had said to her before. He smiled, feeling the warmth begin to bloom where there had only been numbness before. "With you," he replied quietly. "Always." Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. Their first Christmas together was just beginning. Christmas Eve settled gently over the city, covering Chicago in a mantle of calm that felt almost sacred. Snow descended outside Ethan's window in slow, lazy spirals, catching the warm, golden glow spilling from inside. The house no longer looked like a museum made of glass and expensive silence. Tonight, it felt alive, filled with the warmth of cinnamon cocoa simmering in the kitchen, the sound of Lily humming a carol softly, and the gentle crunch of wrapping paper that she insisted on folding herself, even if the tape stuck more to her elbows than to the packages. In the living room, the Christmas tree sparkled with the lights Ethan and Lily had hung together, some straight, some crooked, all perfect. Lily stood on a small stool, stretching to place her mother's scarf near the top of the tree. The soft fabric rested delicately on the highest branch, its faded blue threads shimmering slightly under the lights. She liked blue more than any other color, Lily whispered. She said it looked like hope. Ethan held the stool with one hand, and in the other, he held a luminous star. "Then she chose the perfect place," he murmured, passing her the star. She pressed it into his palm. "You put it up," she said. "Mommy would want that." His throat tightened. He placed the star next to the scarf and stepped back to contemplate how the two rested together. Light and memory woven into the heart of their new home. Later, tucked into her new fluffy pajamas, Lily curled up next to Ethan on the sofa, resting her head on his arm. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the room with warmth and shadows that danced on the walls. Lily traced a small figure on his sleeve with her fingertip, a distracted, tender gesture he had learned to treasure. "Ethan," she whispered. "Tell me, little one." She hesitated, took a deep breath, gathering courage in her small lungs. "Are we a family now?" The question hung in the air, fragile, trembling, beautiful. Ethan turned to her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We've been a family since the moment you grabbed my coat," he said softly. "The universe just needed time to catch up." Her lips curved into a small smile, the kind that doesn't burst wide open, but slowly blooms, like a flower that finally dares to open after the frost. Just before midnight, they bundled up in their coats and scarves. Lily insisted on wearing the slightly lopsided scarf Ilara had knitted for Ethan. They walked out onto the blanket of soft snow covering the sidewalk and walked hand in hand to Lincoln Park, where Ilara rested beneath a newly planted cherry tree. The night was quiet, save for the soft crunch of snow under their boots. Lily held a small, handmade ornament, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. When they reached the tree, she knelt on the snow, sweeping the flakes off the headstone. "Hello, Mommy," she whispered, her breath fogging the air. "We brought you something." She unwrapped the ornament, a small wooden circle painted with a star and the words, "Mommy's last Christmas wish." Her hands were shaking, but Ethan held them as she hung the ornament from a low branch. Together they stood there, watching it hang, swaying slightly in the winter breeze. Lily leaned against his coat. "Do you think she sees us?" she asked quietly. Ethan bent down, lifting her into his arms, holding her close to shield her from the cold. "Every day," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And she would be so proud of you, Lily, of everything you've become." On the way home, snowflakes settled in Lily's hair, melting into small glints on her curls. She squeezed his hand, gently swinging their arms, as she hummed the same melody she used to sing beside Alara's bed. When they stepped back inside, the warmth enveloped them instantly, as if the house itself welcomed it. Lily ran to her room for a moment, and when she returned, she held a freshly drawn piece of paper, the edges slightly crinkled, the colors bright and soft. "I made it for you," she said. Almost shyly, Ethan took it carefully. It showed the two of them standing under the falling snow, Lily in her pink coat, him in his long, dark coat, holding hands under a sky full of stars. Their silhouettes overlapped slightly, as if even their shadows had found each other. At the bottom, in her neatest handwriting, she had written, "Where Christmas found us." Ethan felt something shift deep within him, a part he hadn't recognized since before tragedy carved a hollow void in his life. He pulled her close, kissing the crown of her head softly. "It's the best gift I've ever received," he said, "in my whole life." But Christmas, in Lily's world, wasn't complete without sharing. So, after the hot cocoa and cookies and one last look at the tree, they loaded bags full of small gifts, coloring books, mittens, and boxes with hot meals into the car. "They're for the children who don't have enough," Lily said proudly, like Mommy wanted. They drove through quiet streets dusted with silver snow, stopping at shelters, hospitals, and the same neighborhood where Lily had lived in fear just weeks before. Every time Lily handed a gift to another child, her smile grew a little bigger. Every time Ethan saw her joy, he felt his own heart settle a little more into the place it had been seeking. Near dawn, when the horizon glowed a pale gold, they returned home. Lily stood by the window, watching the last flakes fall, the soft light reflecting her small silhouette in the glass. Ethan approached, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Their reflections overlapped, two silhouettes melting into a single warm, luminous shape. He closed his eyes, raising his face toward the ceiling in a silent moment. And, to the wife he once feared betraying by moving on, he whispered very softly, "You were right. Love doesn't disappear. It just finds someone new to save." When he opened his eyes, Lily turned, smiling. Sleepily, "Can we do this every Christmas?" she asked. Ethan lifted her into his arms. "Everyone," he promised. Outside, the world was covered in fresh snow. Inside, a new family had already begun to flourish, born not of blood, but of a love strong enough to survive the coldest winter. Audience interaction and call to action. If this story has touched your heart, even just a little, we invite you to stay with us. Because here at Distorting Tales, every story reminds us that love, kindness, and second chances still exist. And if you were moved, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Every click helps us spread more kindness in the world. There are more stories waiting, tales of resilience, of hope, and of silent heroes among us. So, if you believe in the healing power of love and the beauty of life's small moments, be sure to subscribe to Distorting Tales and turn on notifications, because the next story might be just the one your heart has been waiting for.